So. Hashtag no music, no intro. Another episode of the Saints Block Party podcast, and we are honored to have an amazing guest joining our podcast, Matt Waldman of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. This feels like a kind of a full circle moment. Ryan and I have been listening to Matt when he was doing podcasts with Sig, and it just kind of comes from that like on Twitter, just building a brand type of thing. And so, we recently had Matt Harmon on a couple of months ago, and we all kind of interacted over the years on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. And so to have Matt Waldman on, his excellent work in the rookie scouting portfolio is just amazing. So to have you on, it's really an honor, man. We really appreciate you jumping on and talking football and talking Saints with us this evening.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys having me on. I've been following you guys for a while, and I've been looking forward to this opportunity. And no better time than just after the rookie drafts and get a chance to take a little bit of a break. And I'm getting geared up for the season, and putting out rankings for footballguys.com. So
Ooh.
I'm working on my rankings right now, and I just finished the rankings and projections that I do for my RSP subscribers. So this is a perfect time to be able to do that, because things aren't really bustling just yet, but all the groundwork's been laid thus far. So for us to look at the news now at this point, and I feel like that it'll be a fun time to talk ball. And I think the Saints are, for the past couple of years, have been one of the more intriguing teams in the league to just
Really?
to cover. Yeah, because it's from a change standpoint.
Yeah.
It may not be from a wins losses standpoint, and there's a change
You're
from
right.
the guard, but it's like, your quarterback situation's been interesting to see. Maybe disappointing for fans on one level, but I was last year coming into this year, I was thinking, if Rashid Shaheed really takes that next step, and they can provide protection to Derek Carr and give him that protection, maybe this could be his like career year with the kind of weaponry that they have. And then out the gate, Trevor Penning just couldn't hold it, and it killed Carr, because Carr needs that time more than most quarterbacks to really to be good on the level that you could see the potential for him, but it's never really fully been realized. And so you see things like that. You see the depth of talent that they have at certain positions. There's
Right.
still guys that you kind of want to believe in, like, at least from as a guy who evaluates talent, like Foster Moreau. To me, like, I look at him and go, there's there's more in this bag than that's out here. But then he had the illness, and
Yep.
you look at Kendre Miller, and then there's even another quarterback that I really like, that
Oh.
in this group, that might fit really well in this offense that you guys have with Clint Kubiak, because that West Coast game doesn't necessarily emphasize that you have to have a massive arm, but you have to be pretty smart and process the field, and be kind of a gamer from the pocket. And you know that guy's looking pretty good in
Ju-
OTAs.
Juicy Jake. Juicy Jake
Yes,
Juicy
style.
Jake,
yes,
baby.
yeah.
It's funny you say, because this is something we've talked about on this podcast, and I have some sources in the building or outside the building or whatever, but going into OTAs and going into training camp, and like halfway through training camp last off season, there were some in the Saints building who thought that Jake Hayner was the best quarterback on the team, better than Derek Carr, better than Jameis Winston. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was his preseason play. I don't know what happened, or he did get the suspension for the substances or what have you. I don't know what happened that got them to maybe think differently, or got the perception of him inside the building to change a little bit. But to me, if that was the perception of some of the people in the building going into like halfway through training camp last season, this, like you said, this offense is tailor made for him. It is tailor made for him to. I don't know. I'm not going to say he's going to come out and put pressure on Derek Carr, but he he's gonna have opportunities, which is exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree. It's not. I think probably what happened is that there's probably one key individual in the building, probably the head coach, who's like, "Yeah, ain't no way I'm starting a rookie quarterback over a guy we
Right.
paid," and along with the GM, and the GMs are like, "We paid money for this, and we're not gonna ruin that idea here," and also, rookies look great in practice, and then really part of it too is they need some seasoning to really understand how defenses are going to play them, the complexity of coverages that they're going to see, the speed of the game, all that stuff. And defenses gather a book on quarterbacks. I talk about that a lot. Is that their rookie year, Jake Haener could come in, like Derek Carr could get hurt. Jake Haener could come in and deliver like a 300-yard game, and
Yep.
everybody's going to lose their mind and say he's the
We
quarterback
see
of
it.
our future.
We see
And
it all the time. Yeah.
yeah,
We saw
and
we saw it with Josh Dobbs last season.
yes, exactly. And then midway
Will
through the
Levis.
season,
Will Levis first
Will
start. Yeah.
Will Levis, yeah, and before that in Tennessee, Marcus Mariota, who also threw for 5 touchdowns in his first game. The last, and if we think about it for real, the last quarterback that the Tennessee Titans drafted who was any good was Steve McNair. If you really look at it, that's the last. I
Yeah.
mean, Vince Young had a good first season,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but really didn't sustain it. And, Ryan Tannehill doesn't count,
Jake,
and
Jake Locker, baby. Jake
Jake
Locker.
Locker.
I still believe, Ryan.
Exactly. So, Steve McNair is the last one. So that's the thing is that, teams gather a book on guys after 5 to 6 weeks. They start putting things in and saying, okay, we don't think you can stop these things. So let's start throwing this
Yeah.
at you, and they gather more. So Hayner, though, the fact that Hayner sought out Gruden to learn that style of offense and really get
Yeah.
the intricacies, the fact that Fresno State, I mean, my podcast partner Felix Sharp over at Campus to Canton, he's been talking about Jake Hayner for a couple of years before he even got
Wow.
drafted. Really loved him, and I remember watching him going, I get it, like just
Exactly.
really, really smart in the pocket, tough,
Yeah.
you
A
know.
gamer, just gritty.
You
Like
see
got
it.
some
Yes.
grit to
You
him.
see it. You see it. When we drafted him, I knew nothing about him, nothing
Nothing.
whatsoever. I said, okay, let me go and crack the tape open and see. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I see it. You see what the Saints saw.
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing to me is he talked about recently, Jake Hayner. He talked about how trying to learn the Saints playbook from last year, which under Pete Carmichael, which was the Sean Payton playbook, a playbook that's been built year after year over almost 20 years with Drew Brees in mind, designed for Drew Brees, very wordy, very complicated. And he talked about, it was hard. Like it was very tough to learn that playbook. Trying to learn when you ask a question, they show you what Drew Brees would do. Well, it's like it's Drew Brees. Like
Yeah.
it might call for a 5-step drop. Drew Brees might do it in 7 steps, but he does it so quickly because that's the way he does it. So it was so hard for him to learn these different things. So now, fast forward, the Saints are making a change on offense for the first time in almost 20 years. Bringing
Ooh,
Clint
that's
Kubiak,
insane.
insane. Bringing Clint Kubiak, bringing Rick Dennison, bringing John
John
Benton, running the O
Benton.
line, completely changed the offense. And I'm just excited to see what's it going to
Ooh.
look like. Because I've been looking at the same offense for so long, which was a good offense, but it's kind of time for some change.
Yeah, and when you think about that change, I mean, you see what he did a couple of years ago, or really 3 years ago, in Minnesota. And when Minnesota had the weapons and a decent enough offensive line that you had a 1,600-yard year from Justin Jefferson, and I think you had 3 receivers with at least 600 to 800 yards overall, including Jefferson. It was Thielen and KJ Osborne started to pop off that year,
Yeah.
and they even got um, Tyler Conklin, to even get about 500 yards and a few touchdowns kicked in. And I believe that was Dalvin Cook also had like an 1,100 or 1,300 yard season as a runner. So that offense clicked on all cylinders, and you could see, it's shorter passing. You get play action, a lot of movement off that play action with the wide zone, something that they really like to run a lot. And I think Kamara is well adept at wide zone. You can still also use different types of zone looks with Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is a smart runner in that regard. Maybe not unbelievably dynamic, but
Right.
certainly a guy who can get you what they're asking for the play script. And Kendre Miller's a wild card. I mean, certainly if he can, he's got all the talent to be the lead back of the future for them. So you put that in there, and then look at the tight end talent that they have because, Moreau can do well, play action up the seam. He's quick. His quickness was always his big thing, not so much deep speed, but he's a good blocker who can deliver for you in the play action game. Taysom Hill, whether they're going to, like they said, they're going to use him in that Justin Juszczyk type of role or Kyle Juszczyk type of role, or the James Casey role if we go back to Daddy Kubiak back in Texans
Oh, that's a
land,
good one
you
there.
know, or the kid
Man.
from Wisconsin that used to be there, Garrett
Owen.
Graham.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Gary
Owen
Graham.
Daniels too.
Daniel. Yeah, Owen
Yeah, both
Daniels.
they were the similar type of role,
Oh,
right?
well, that's all just
Yeah,
coming back to me,
yeah,
Matt.
exactly. Just all
Oh
those the
man.
H backs that who had good years. So
Mm,
you're going to have two tight. They're going to be able to employ two tight ends a lot. So whether they have a lot of flexibility. If A.T. Perry, the wide receiver that has some good route skills or potential as a route runner, if he can really put it all together, Rashid Shaheed can continue to play the way that he has and continue to grow. And Carr finds that connection with Olave the way he should, who's one of the better route runners in the game. Um, they can go three wide if they want to, maybe four if they want to. But if they want to go too tight, they've got two tight ends, especially with Hill, or they can go three if they want to, and they could have that extra gap to help out their runners. And Kamara, I mean, listen, I mean, I know that people have been down on him who just follow the box score.
Yeah.
But considering this offseason that he had enough distractions that probably you can look at that and say maybe the end isn't near. It's just that maybe he had a distraction filled offseason, and we'll see him get it back on track and have maybe another strong year or two before it's time. And if he doesn't, they're loaded enough, to be able to do well. And with an eighth gap, with an outside zone type of system, you can be a little more simplistic about asking your back to just like hit the given hole like the 49ers like to do with their wide zone, which Denver's wide zone under the Kubiaks was like with Terrell Davis and all those backs back in the day where they were like it was incumbent upon the back to pick the hole and create, or like
Right.
Devonta Freeman used to do. Like, with Kyle Shanahan, he wanted Tevin Coleman, but Tevin Coleman, while he played outside zone in Indiana, he was like a don't think meat, just hit one hole hard
Yeah.
because
Right.
they tried to do that with him early on and he got shut down, and they had
Yeah.
to take him off the field and they start giving him gap plays like power, just like one crease and that's it. And they let Devonta do the thing because Devonta has
Right.
that creativity. Well, in Kyle Shanahan's offense, he's figured out, and you can see by all the backs that he picked and the ones that he liked before McCaffrey, they were all fast guys that you just hit one hole, let the line do
yep.
all
And
the work
go.
for you.
Right.
Yeah,
Go.
Exactly.
and I think that if they have to with Kendre Miller, if they feel like Kendre Miller still has some things to learn, they can probably get away with doing that with two or three tight ends and creating
Right.
that extra gap and making it a little bit easier on him. Or with Jamal, where, because you got that third gap that's blocked, that extra gap that's blocked, he may not be breaking 12, 13, 15, 40-yard runs, but he
No.
might he's that Jordan Howard type of player who's going to give you 6 to 8 on a good run, but he'll keep giving that to you all day long as the line's performing reasonably well.
It's funny you say that. That's been like a take of one of our supporters. His name's Dante. That he still believes that Jamal Williams can give something. There are times last season, bad offensive line play aside, bad offensive coaching aside, he just looked like he had no juice. Like
Yeah.
it looked bad. Now, with the new system in place, is there a role for him on the team? it looks like there is. He was getting like a bulk of the running back snaps at OTAs when AK was not there. So it seems like there may be a vision of him still, in terms of what he can bring into the team, which I think is really important. Just wanted to get your overall thoughts. We're talking about kind of like these pieces. It's very exciting, but it all boils down to Derek Carr and the offensive line. They are trusting. So basically, they drafted Fuaga. They're putting him at left tackle. That he's going to stay at left tackle, and then they gave Trevor Penning a clean slate. Said, you know what, your right tackle, whatever's happened in your career thus far, don't worry about it. We're giving you a clean slate at right tackle. What is just your thoughts of the Saints offensive line? It's new to everyone. Just your impressions of the prospects that that they drafted over the last few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, my colleague Matt Batanti, who does a lot of offensive line work and was a former offensive lineman himself, heading into the season, he had a really high grade for the potential for the Saints unit heading into the season last year, and the key was obviously Penning, and it just kind of fell apart there. But and we saw what happened. I mean, I don't want to dig up the past and dwell in it too badly, but the thing is that when you don't have a left tackle for a right-handed quarterback, now you make your offense far more predictable because now you have to have an extra man on the line all the time, and he can't go out for passes, so you're restricting how many guys are going out to attack the coverage.
Right.
Your the amount of time that you have, the amount of trust that you have in your timing. Everyone's forced to overthink and adjust in ways that are just not with the flow of what you've practiced for months. So that's tough. I think that there's enough talent with this team that putting Penning on the right side, that's great. And the fact that they said that, I think that from a coaching standpoint and a management standpoint, that's probably a good thing. Even if some fans might be split on that because they're like, God, he was so awful, last year, and you're just like, just get rid of him. But you, there are a lot of guys in the league who've been pretty darn good as right tackles after they failed as left tackles.
Yeah.
So, you got to they like his physical talent. They feel like that they've got to give him another chance, and I think that that's wise to do. Drafting a guy who they're going to keep at left tackle, it may be a little trial by fire for him, so he's going to have some moments. And but the interior line I think is decent enough with this team, and then the fact that you can employ a shorter passing game, more of that West Coast based play action oriented, multiple tight end type of thing, you can do enough to make defenses guess that gives Derek Carr that extra beat to look over the defense. So I think that on the whole, we may not be looking and going, this is the Philadelphia Eagles line or the Cleveland Browns line or something like that, in recent years. But could they be in the top third of the league if if the rookie works out all right and Penning actually does well with his clean slate? I absolutely think they can. And if that's the case with with shorter drops and getting the ball out and letting these guys run with the ball, and these guys all have the skills after the catch. Most of them do, I would say. Why not? So there's going to be a lot of misdirection too. I think you're going to see that's what Kubiak's really good at.
Yes.
You'll notice like a lot of these. You're going to see a lot of play action rolls with throwbacks to tight ends and wide open areas. Like Taysom Hill might be really interesting, like with like one or
Yes.
two plays, maybe one play a game where he gets a wheel route that just is out in the wide open flat where he's catching the ball by himself 15, 20, 25 yards down the field and gaining another 15 to 25 after that. And I'm sure you could see the same thing with Kamara on possibilities with certain screens. The screen game's going to be strong there. And
Please.
Kamara and Williams are
Please.
both really strong at the screen game. So yeah, you've got that. And of course, I mean, Olave is very good after the catch if you give
Right.
him the chance and not just be a downfield guy. So I think it just creates a lot more versatility for this team, and it doesn't have to be short or long. You're going to get a lot of you're going to get a lot mixed up in there, and it's going to be getting the ball out quickly. So overall, I'm more optimistic. Last year, I was too optimistic in the way of like, this could
Us
be
too.
a, this
We
could
all
be
were.
a, this could
We
be a
all were.
5,000-yard season for Derek Carr if really this all clicks. Like I said, this is probably remote if it happens, but like I could see this upside. This year, I'm looking like, could we get 42 to 4,500 yards and maybe 25 to 27 touchdowns out of him with the offense clicks?
Please.
I think so. I think it
Look,
can. Now, is it still a moderate sized if? Yeah, I think so. But it's not as crazy as what I thought last year. And then watching that Titans game and going, well, that whole idea is in the tank after watching their left
right,
tackle. That was
right.
just oof. Yeah.
And the thing is, like, if you look at the final, I mean, everybody keeps talking about the final 4 or 5 games from last year where Derek Carr, like, he put up some really good statistics. His quarterback rating was great. His completion, I think pretty much every box score quarterback statistic, he was like top of the league in those final 4 or 5 games. Why? Well, look, you can look at the opponent. He wasn't facing the greatest opponents, but also, Pete Carmichael. They finally implemented more play
Yep.
action from under center. They finally started using some motion. Just a lot of the things that,
Motion.
like,
Motion.
whoa, motion. Can you believe it? And so a lot of the things that worked for Derek Carr, they started using, and it's like, oh, and lo and behold, he was playing pretty decently. So I guess the hope is with this Clint Kubiak system is that, I mean, look, Dennis Allen said it. He wanted more play action. He wanted play action from under center. He wanted a better run game. The Saints had like the bottom. I think they weren't the last, but they were like third to last in yards per carry last year. I mean, you can't have that. It's just terrible. So I think and the game tape is like actually more consistent, and you get a lot of touchdowns early in the games instead of during garbage time and stuff like that.
Garbage time.
I'd be completely fine with that. Like, I'd be so fine if that was the outcome and it just the consistency week to week was better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and let's remember something that John Gruden tie again. We had Jake Hager working with John Gruden. Well, Derek Carr worked with John Gruden, and some of his best seasons came from 2019 or 2018 through 2021 under Gruden. He had a 4,800-yard season in his final year with Gruden, and 23 touchdowns. He had a 27 touchdown season with only 9 interceptions. And he was completing between 67 and 70% of his passes from 2019 to 2021 under Gruden. Gruden's Gruden's offense is a classic West Coast offense. So is the
Classic.
Kubiak offense.
Yep.
Yeah.
So really, what was funny is that a lot of us, my buddy Mark Schofield, who I've had on podcasts a lot, does a lot with quarterback play and was a former quarterback at Wesleyan. I remember him writing something from my site years ago saying, ideally, the Josh McDaniels offense could really be great for Derek Carr because of all the play action and giving him all the bells and whistles to read things, you know, pre snap and make adjustments because that's where he's best is all the pre snap adjustments and things like that. But that didn't work out so well, right? Right.
Uh,
So
I don't blame.
there, I know. It's so funny how that was, and you look at it and go, well, that was a disaster. And part of that disaster is just Josh McDaniels himself. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
he's one of those guys. You want him to be your sous chef. You don't want him to be you don't want him to be like Gordon Ramsay because he'll be
Right,
No.
Gordon
right, right.
Ramsay like with an
Idiot sandwich. Sorry,
exactly,
I couldn't help myself.
exactly. He's Gordon Ramsay who probably needs some medication. But like that's the but yeah, I mean, looking at his career in retrospect, yeah, it was the West Coast that was best for him. So
Right.
so I think that going back to that is great, and I think part of that is that Carr's one of those guys who people misevaluate quarterbacks a lot because they're like, how do they do on the whiteboard? How do they do in the interview? How do they do retaining play calls, regurgitating information? When really the info is how well are they on the field when all that shit's going
Thank
down
you.
and they've
Thank
got
you,
to
Matt.
process it fast
Thank you.
and like integrate the physical, mental, emotional of the game and come up with solutions because Brett Favre was dumber than rocks on certain things.
Yeah.
In the way that
Most
they
things, I
measure
think
them,
we can
yeah,
say
and
now.
probably most things. But but when it came to football, he was a savant when it came
Yeah.
to the game, And I think that Anthony Richardson, people are looking at him and saying, "Oh, he's raw, he's raw, he's raw," and I'm like, "No, he's inexperienced. There's a difference because that dude can process fast. That dude really understands how to process the game." But yeah, has he seen cover two as often as Drake May saw cover two? No, but is he gonna shit his pants because when something unexpected happens? Probably not.
Right. Right.
And Derek Carr has a propensity that when
Shit his
when he,
pants.
yeah when too much is on his plate, he can't make it to the bathroom on time. And, so he does have a little bit of that. He does have a little bit of that with him, and so you,
He's a
you
great
give him
look, and
quick
look, he's
solutions.
a great salesman, man. Like, here's the thing: if
Oh,
like we talk on this
outstanding.
podcast when we signed him, we were like, "Hey, this is a great signing." Um, I felt just like a lot of people. Like, look, he got a raw deal with the Raiders. This is a new location from him. He's going to do good in the scheme. It's a scheme that's similar to what he came from with John Gruden. Da 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 da. Then you was listening to him interview. He's like, man, this is a heady quarterback. He's going to have the pre-snap motion and all that stuff. He's going to have all that down. And then the game started. It's just like it's not really
It's
connected.
like the musician who like practices great, and then when they get on the stage, like they
Freeze up.
suddenly
They
freak out.
freeze.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's
Yes.
totally Derek Carr isn't that bad all the time, but when the moments
Right.
happen where like if he screws up or somebody screws up, he's not the one that's gonna create something and keep things
No.
afloat. He's the
I want
one
to
that's
make.
gonna freak out when
Okay,
it
this is going to be
happens.
a completely obscure reference, and
That's
I say
all right. I
obscure
love him.
just because it was on my Jay put on Mean Girls recently, the original one. But like when they're doing the performance of Santa Baby, I don't know if anyone's seen Mean Girls. I don't know.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
but
No.
but at some point in the performance, like the radio gets knocked over, and there's no music, right?
Yeah.
And then Lindsay Lohan's character pretty much just goes a cappella. That is not Derek Carr. Like
No.
if the radio goes out, bruh, like the performance is done. Like it
Yeah.
is done.
Yeah.
Like
That's
they're going off the stage.
yep. That's exactly it. And when I way back in the day when I used to write for Football Outsiders and I would do some work there and I evaluated Derek Carr, I started doing something what I called a knockout factor for quarterbacks, and I got rid of it because I felt like it was too controversial and something that like didn't have enough nuance to what I was trying to evaluate. Um, and I didn't want to just get attention. I wanted it to be good. So, but what I
Right.
was hoping for with the knockout factor was that if you're not good enough in the pocket and you freak out under certain types of pressure or certain pressure packed situations and you just go haywire and you don't and your processing just gets stuck in cement. That's kind of a and I had different factors or different things that I would measure for that overall characterization I just made. I would say I don't care if your grade was high enough to be a first round pick. You're not off my board. And there were two players that got the knockout factor in the 2 years that I did it. They were Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr. And they both had higher grades, but they both
Right.
got that knockout factor. And I only did it for like 2 or 3 years, and then I got rid of it because I felt
Oh
like there are
man.
better ways to describe what the issue is. Because like, there are, Zach Wilson is a perfect example of a player who would have
Ooh.
failed the knockout
Yes.
factor. He would have
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
a knockout factor. I would say Drake May is dangerously close to the knockout factor.
Ooh, that's
Y- You
Th-
interesting.
know,
th-
you know, but
this
like,
year's this past season at North Carolina, Drake May, or including last season as well.
including last season. That dude,
Interesting.
that dude does not throw the ball away. I had to watch 6.5 games to see him throw a ball away. Now,
Woo.
and trust me, I watch enough tape that usually when I say guys don't throw the ball away enough, I'm usually talking about that there were 2 or 3 opportunities they should have thrown the ball away in a game, and they only threw the ball
Right.
away once. To wait six
Right.
and a half games for a dude to throw a ball
Wow.
away, watching
It's a
two
lot.
years, that was eye opening. But like he could be good, but that's the thing. Like Derek Carr's been good, he just hasn't been great. And I
Yeah.
think that he needs the talent around him to be really good. Like Kirk
There it
Cousins is
is.
that way. Kirk
Yeah.
Cousins is. I've always joked that Kirk Cousins had thinks on 3rd and 16 that he has the arm of Elway and Brett Favre,
He
and that
really
early in
does.
his career he tried to like make those baldacious types of throws, and he would get smothered and he'd look awful. And then they figured out how to get talent around him, and he calmed down enough that he wasn't as much of a third down prima donna. But
Right.
that's kind of the thing. He needs a lot of talent around him to thrive, and I think Carr's the same way. And the Saints have the potential for it. It's just,
Yeah.
are they going to get the click?
Right. Right.
We shall see.
I was about to say, I remember reading your blog years ago. This was years ago. And there was a term you used to use. You talked about Drew Brees. I don't remember. Was it process oriented?
Oh,
You
like
were,
was it Baker Chef or game creative and task
yeah,
oriented?
great task oriented. That's what it was. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out where does Carr fit in that description.
Yeah, I think he's task oriented.
Task
That's for
oriented.
sure.
He's for 100%
Yeah.
task oriented,
Yeah.
without question.
Yeah, he's not. Now, Tom Brady, I would argue, is task oriented, but he's like so high end task oriented that
Mm.
it kind of
Ooh.
bleeds into looking
Into
creative
Baker.
because
Yeah.
Ooh.
he's so precise, and he has so many he has all the details together that the adjustments he makes are really process oriented, but he just notices
Right.
things faster. Whereas maybe a guy like Favre or Mahomes, they're both have enough process oriented baseline stuff to be a good NFL quarterback, but they're creative and they can
Right.
create things in a manner where you go, or Anthony Richardson, where you can look at something and go, you're going to look at places where you're going to go, no, 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 yes, 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 yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you're right.
That's a creative guy usually, you know. So yeah, Derek Carr is definitely process oriented. I would say he's in the mid range of that for a starter, you know, and that level.
One of our listeners, so we're live streaming this to YouTube right now. So if you're watching this along with the YouTube, please like and subscribe. But Dante says Carr is not a quarterback that can put the team on his back and go get the win. All
Yep.
you ask is that he may not be the reason for the loss. I
Yep.
think that is so
Perfect.
eloquently said,
And he's
perfectly said.
tough, you know. And there's so much to like about him, like you guys said. And on top of that, he's tough. I mean, he
He
took some
is.
punishment.
He is.
You,
He
you
is.
know,
He got like there. He got like there were some hits that he got last season that were now some of them were kind of a little on him because holding on to the
Yep.
ball, not not letting.
Yep.
But he got like crushed on some plays last
Yeah.
season, and
Yeah.
he didn't miss a game.
Yeah. If you would, he's admirable for that, without a doubt. It's just that one element that really makes you a franchise caliber elite quarterback that's missing.
Right.
Yeah.
Um. We spent a lot of time talking about the Saints offense. This is also very much a team where Dennis Allen is a defensive coordinator. This is the most important season of his head coaching career. We talked about it all the time. His NFL, head coaching record is 24-46. He won 9 games last season with one of the easiest schedules in NFL like history in terms of like the schedule was easy, and then the breaks that the Saints got along the way was also very easy. But this is still largely a team that the defense is going to be the driving force of it. Me and Ryan have talked about this. There's talent. Like the secondary talent is really up there in terms of the upper echelon in terms of talent in the league, especially considering that it looks like Marshawn Lattimore is going to be back with the team. He's not going to be traded. Yeah, Marshawn Lattimore, you have Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor, the team's not very high on, but he's a talented player, although albeit immature. And they drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry. The linebackers, you have DeMario, who's timeless, who's still playing at a high level. They picked up Willie Gay in free agency from the Chiefs, who I think gives them juice and just added athleticism. Pete Warner had two first good seasons, and then he's kind of trailed off. He's regressed quite a bit, so that's also explaining the Willie Gay signing. And then the defensive line, Brian Bresee was a great pick. Carl Granderson, Big Creep, had a breakout season. But other than that, pass rush has been largely a concern. Just from an outsider's perspective, what are your thoughts when you think of the Saints defense? And they signed Chase Young in free agency. They said, he's meeting with his doctor for his neck checkup this week. Um, it's so interesting to see how this defense comes out and plays this season.
Yeah, and I think that there's another. I'm going to go back to the offense before I get to the defense here because it ties together. Is that when you look at this defense and you see the strengths of it, which is like you said, the secondary, and then you have Demario Davis who can blitz from the middle linebacker spot, and then you have Granderson who can get to the pass to the passer as well as Cam. So and then if Chase is in that mix, then now you've got a nice rotation. But up front in the middle, are you going to be able to create those opportunities with just 4-man pass rush
Right.
and cover? And the answer is not really. So that means that you either have to play man to man and blitz with the linebackers, or you're creating certain types of stunts and slower developing types of rush, or you're playing zone. And that you don't really want to play as much zone with the guys that you got in that back area. You'd really like to get pressure and clamp down man to man. And in order to do that, you've got to be playing with leads or in a tight game. And I think that, in order for that to happen, that means you have to have longer drives. You can't have a lot of 3 and outs. You can't have, you've got to be able to run the ball, and you've got to be able to, make that defense suck wind that you're facing, so that
Complementary football.
Yep. And when that opposing offense gthey haven't been on the field for a while. You can do some more things to be aggressive and surprise. You can play with a lead and be more aggressive. So if the Saints offense is doing what it's supposed to do, this defense is going to look pretty good because they're going to be able to play more man. They're going to be able to blitz. They're going to attack. And this is a defense you want attacking because guy like Tyrann Mathieu, in the back end there to be able to roam around, and then you can maybe throw him into the mix and let him blitz a little bit. You can do some things with him and Davis that could be nice. Gay being as quick as he is, maybe you can do a little bit there. But I would say more than anything, that's what you want is that if you play with the lead, you blitz that extra man or 2 men and play that back end well, they're doing fine. And now the nice part is if you look at the division, well, the Carolina Panthers, they've made improvements along the offensive line, but still some big question marks there, especially at receiver and whether Bryce Young's going to be able to get it together with this crew. And especially if their owner is going to continue to write plays, calls on a napkin, and make switches like he's at a corporate.
You think he me?
Yeah, he's. He does, and he ain't halfway. He ain't even halfway there. So he's we got a problem there. So, but you got that. You got Atlanta, and you got Cousins, and my buddy Brandon Angelo, who's a trainer for that I do a show Going Deep with. He's a trainer for pro athletes. And one of the things that he brought up with Kirk Cousins that I think people are missing out on, because I think Michael Penix was a fantastic pick, and I know everyone thinks it was awful.
Matt. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
It's so awful what people have been saying because it's like number one, he's the second best quarterback in this class, if you ask me.
This man's spitting right now, Ryan.
Number two, they overplayed. I mean, this guy wore pressure. He wore pressure. He had more pressure than what Derek Carr saw last year for most of his career.
That line was
he got
bad
better.
At Washington.
Yeah,
yes.
And before that at Indiana, he was wearing it like a second layer of skin, and he made excellent throws or good decisions to get rid of the ball without turning it over. Usually, when you have that much pressure, that young, you get worse and worse and worse as your career goes on. He got better and better and better, you know. And then on top of it, he's better at processing the field than people realize. And
Absolutely.
Kirk Cousins, you know, listen, I joke about this a lot, and I live in Atlanta, and I grew up in Atlanta. I've been there since '80. I joke that Kirk Cousins is the reason they didn't tell Kirk Cousins that they were going to draft another quarterback is Kirk Cousins probably would have told the media the way that he carries on about things is that so they knew, you know, they already charged tampering because of him
Yeah,
communicating
Right.
the way he did, and
that's true,
because he's
man.
got that kind of hero factor about things,
Oh,
and
big time.
he was brought in to be kind of the fly in the ointment for Robert Griffin because you know Mike Shanahan didn't want Robert Griffin, so he convinced them to draft you know Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins has always had a little bit of that feel like he had the right to be what he is, and
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that for him to say that I really was disappointed. I hope they picked someone who'd help this team right away. Well, back to Brandon Angelo. When you're 35, going to turn 36, and you've torn your Achilles,
Come
Yeah.
on, bro.
and it's on your right foot, and you drive off that, or it's on the foot that you're going to be driving off
And
of to
you push
throw,
off of it.
and it's difficult to deliver that kind of torque you need when you've had that Achilles tear. And he says that I should be ready for camp, but I can only run in a straight line right now. If I have to rush out of a pocket,
Whew.
and you know break a pocket or flush, that may be tough right
Oh,
now. And so
oh,
this is like that Tony Pollard. I'm healthy enough to play, but I certainly don't look like Tony Pollard last year when I
Yeah,
came back
yeah.
from my injury. There's a chance, as Brandon said, that Kirk Cousins might not be very accurate to begin the season or throughout the season if that Achilles isn't totally there. And we saw you see Atlanta twice a year, and whether you hate them or you despise them, you know one thing that you can say is
well said, Matt.
they
Well
have a
said.
hey, you know I'm a Browns fan. I say that about the Steelers. So you know you can look at that and you can be objective and say they have a really strong run game. Their
Oh,
offensive line is pretty darn
yes,
good, and they
yes.
had the right coach in terms of scheme. They just had a quarterback who couldn't process the field, and they had to simplify things so that if he couldn't find the first two reads,
Run.
the play was over.
Oh,
Yeah, the
yeah,
play
or
was
run.
over, and so everyone's blaming Alex Smith for Drake London and you know, and Kyle Pitts not getting going. But if you can only run one route and you can't
Yeah.
continue through an open window because you can't trust your quarterback to find you, and you're keeping things static the way they were, Arthur Smith basically fell on his playbook and sacrificed himself because he was stuck with Desmond Ritter, whether he wanted him or whether he
Or
got
not.
saddled with him.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so he's in Pittsburgh now. But the point being is that, yeah, Kirk Cousins right now, they have the offense. They have the offense, and they've got promising players on defense. But if they had a quarterback last year, they win that division. They win your
Outright.
division with a
Yeah.
quarterback. You know, so what's more important, having a second quarterback who can come in and play from the jump, or a defensive lineman for a team that probably needs three or four more defenders? You know, so
Yeah.
And,
that's yeah.
and one of the more underrated things that came out, I think it was not Jesse Palmer, someone from the NFL Network. I'm blanking on his name. Came out and reported that the Saints were trying to trade up ahead
It
of
was Palmer.
Atlanta. Palmer, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking of
Yeah.
the guy from The Bachelor, but that was so that came out right, and then almost immediately there was a lot of pushback from local Saints media. We love John Hendricks. Underhill came back and pushed back on it, saying, "Nope, that wasn't a thing. The Saints were not trying to trade up for Michael Penix Jr." That is absolutely not the case. Like that was to preserve Derek Carr's ego
Yep.
of why the Saints were wanting that out there. The Saints were 100% trying to trade up into the top 10 and draft Michael Penix Jr. And we can look at sliding doors, but if that were to happen, the entire trajectory of the team looks drastically different.
Oh man.
But
Yeah, this
it
team,
just goes. Go ahead.
Yeah, this team. I mean, it goes to show you that this is a division that has a lot of weaknesses on offense. Even Baker Mayfield, who had a strong year for Baker Mayfield, and probably will
did.
continue to build on that, I think. But you pressure him, And you pressure him and play tight man, that's his weakness. That's
Yeah.
always been his weakness. And, as a Browns fan, the Browns Network had me on and they go, what do you think of Baker Mayfield? Is he Brett Favre, Russell Wilson, and Drew Brees rolled into one? And I said, no, he's Pro Bowl Jeff Garcia at best. And,
Ooh,
and,
that's a good one.
and
That's a
that,
good
and
one.
that was and you could have heard a pin drop in that studio when I said that. But they had me back on to their credit when after they realized that Baker was that guy because you could watch him against Georgia in that bowl game. In the first half, Georgia played zone, and they rushed from the inside but let him get outside, and then he looked okay. And then Georgia was like, okay, let's play big boy football. We're gonna get the
Yep.
edges high, and we're gonna clamp down man to man. And Baker Mayfield was 1, 2, 3, 4 beats late on pretty much every throw, even the ones he completed. And that's his problem is man to man. So if the Saints are probably the best man to man team in the division,
Right.
for coverage. If they can get ahead and play man to man,
Right.
there's not an offense that's gonna have an easy time with them.
That's the key is can they get the leads? And one of the issues the Saints defense has had for years, even under Dennis Allen, who's, against say Tom Brady, I don't think there's been a defensive coordinator who's done as well against Tom
Woo.
Brady.
Yes.
I mean, but the issue has always been these mobile quarterbacks, which that's pretty much the whole league now. Every quarterback is mobile right now. So that's the kind of the big issue the defenses have, and I don't really know the answer to that because I can't really figure
Mm.
out what is it a scheme? Is it because they love to go man to man, and when you go man to man, you leave openings on the edge for quarterbacks to run, and then they try zone, but it doesn't really work out well because like Marshawn Lattimore, he could play zone, but that's not his bag,
Yeah.
because they like tall, big man to man corners. So it's interesting to see how that will play out, you know, uh, as they go through the season because they're going to face some mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, without a doubt, and that's going to be their weakness if they go deep into the season, into this to January. That's where they're going to have to deal with it. But at the same time, I think, like you said, the rest of the league has to deal with it too, and you kind of have to
Yeah,
realize, okay, well, that just means that your defense has to be really strong in the red zone. You're going to have to be a team that gives up. You're going to have to understand you're giving up certain things. Like you're just
yeah,
going to be like, look, we're losing if this happens on a regular basis, but we can still possibly win the game. And I think that a good example of that is like the Chiefs defense when they faced Josh Allen a few years ago, and Gabriel Davis had like those 3 touchdowns in that game. Well,
yeah,
Hmm.
what the Chiefs were saying was like, look, we know that we need to stop Stephon Diggs. We need to stop, their tight end and maybe their second wide receiver. And Gabe Davis is the guy that runs those zone routes that are long developing off play action or is the third or fourth read. And if they're able to throw and complete passes to Gabe Davis behind the safety, and he's scoring, that means that
God
we weren't
bless.
able to sack Josh Allen. And we're
Josh Allen,
hoping
right?
we're making the bet that we can get to Allen before he can get to Davis. And they lost 3 times in that game, but they won the game. It was a nail biter,
yeah.
but they still won it. And certainly the Monday morning quarterbacks who are going to get on talk radio and podcasts are going to talk about this defense has to play a lot better. But in reality, sometimes you just have to look at a game as a game and say, look,
Mm.
we're playing top teams right now. And it's going to be close, and we just got to. It's going to come down to a handful of plays, and
That's just how it
and
is.
that's our
Yeah,
weakness. So if the Saints are dealing with worrying about the mobile quarterback, it's going to be the ones on like Philadelphia where they have multiple avenues for success on offense.
Week 3.
And yeah, exactly. That's going to be a huge challenge. That's going to be tough. But and they may not have their stuff together, early enough, so you might get a break from that because it's early in the season and you know how teams can be a little slow
yeah,
sometimes to get adjusted. But deep in the off season, but if you're facing like Bryce Young right now. Bryce Young's mobile. I think he has got a lot. I still think he has talent and promise.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, who's he got at receiver beyond Adam Thielen? Deontay Johnson is okay, but he's not a world beater. So this team
Xavier
is,
Leggett, like, I don't know.
yeah, exactly. I mean, screenplays. Let's throw screens to him and jump balls because
yeah.
that's what you're getting with him this year, most likely. So it's a the best opportunity, your best teams are going to be Atlanta and Tampa to deal with, and Tampa's really your biggest challenge right now. Atlanta, we'll see if Cousins can torque off that ankle before we say anything else.
Just as we kind of wrap up here, we don't want to take up too much of your time. This has been just an amazing football discussion. I just want to get your just overall like thoughts, impressions of. I won't go down the Saint like just rookies, and it doesn't have to be Saints rookies. Just some of your favorite players in this last season's draft class. Maybe some players that maybe you didn't love that maybe the consensus, draft Twitter or big draft media liked. Just curious of just how you kind of some of your favorites from this past year's draft class.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, right up my alley. So, um, I think first of all, I thought it was a very interesting quarterback class in the sense that you have Caleb Williams, who I think is kind of tamper-proof in the sense that even the Bears, after screwing up what they did with Justin Fields,
Can't mess them
even
up.
even what they've learned, even what they've learned, and even if they don't fully learn it, I think that they're going to be okay.
Yep.
Caleb's going to be okay because
Yes.
Caleb is a start now, and he'll work his way through it. And there aren't many
Yes.
quarterbacks I think are that way. I think Michael Penix, we talked about. I think he's the closest one to be able to grin and bear through it if he had to. But I think it would be ideal if Cousins can muck his way
Yep.
through this year or do really well. So there's that, and then after that, I think everybody else has potential to be good, but they all ideally could use a year. I think all those quarterbacks could use at least a year, and I think most quarterbacks do because you
Right.
don't get developed in the NFL. You got to develop
Nope.
yourself, and they
Ooh.
need some intermittent
Speak on
playing
it.
time. I'm a big, Drew Brees is the one I always bring up. I always say that Drew Brees talked about who developed him, and he said it was Marty Schottenheimer. Marty Schottenheimer he credits him for his developmental success because he said what happened is I got to the Chargers, you know, I played early, but when I was struggling, Schottenheimer benched me. He'd come over to the bench and say, "Listen, you're still my guy. You're still the future of what we're doing on our
Mm.
football team." He'd actually talk to him, which is what some of these guys look at Adam Gase, and he's in the middle of a coke dream, as Sam Darnold's talking about. He's seen ghosts, on Monday Night Football, and he's just staring off wide-eyed, like not even saying
Yeah,
anything to him. Makes you wonder as a young man whether or not you're going to be in the league tomorrow.
Speak on
exactly.
it, bro.
So he would say that to Breeze and say, "We're going to bring the veteran in, whether it was Flutie or whoever it was,
Yeah.
and if we get close in the fourth quarter, we're going to give you a chance to win it because we believe in you. You
Mm.
just need to clear your head. You need to see the field. Watch what this quarterback's doing. Watch what this is what you weren't doing. This is what you need to do. So you don't overcomplicate things and now start seeing ghosts and you need an exorcist at this point. So this is one of those things that most quarterbacks, if you look at the ones who've been MVP level players, they either sat for a year or two, or they sat and then they got maybe 2 or 3 years of playing time and cleanup duty, or while somebody got hurt. They weren't
Yeah.
leaned on to be the guy here on out, maybe just here on out for 6 weeks or for 3 weeks
Mm.
or for the rest of the season. And then they went back to the bench. And they got time to process their mistakes and to like work on things they need to work on and not worry about the game plan because he's, as you mentioned, I mean, it's a Byzantine game plan for what Drew Brees had put together. Yeah,
Right.
it wasn't that simple. And also you get to level up with good talent. So, it's like music again. I was talking to a couple of musicians. This guy from Los Lobos, the band Los Lobos. I got to hang out with him this winter
Mm.
with a friend of mine who's a composer, and we were hanging out in Atlanta and talking, and they want to talk about football and I want to talk about music. So
About
we kind
music.
of we had the chess clock and we're kind of joking around about this stuff because I'm an amateur musician. So like we're going back and forth talking about that stuff, and they said it's the similarities between quarterbacking and playing music, especially improvisational music, are really there. And one of the things is that you get better as a musician when you play with great musicians because you don't have to overthink about what everyone else is doing. You just got to focus on your job and what you expect to be happening around you
Mm.
is happening around you. So now you're not having to adjust as much, and you can get better at what you're supposed to do. That's why Brock Purdy, like, was I had a good grade on him, like as a guy who could potentially become a starter in a couple of years. But this is why he got good so fast because he was always a good processor. He was always smart in the
Mm.
pocket, but he didn't have to think about whether he was going to deal with pressure here or not, or whether his receiver was going to be in the right spot. They were all
Hmm.
there, and he had a good scheme. Meanwhile, Mac Jones, who I also had a good grade on, he ended up with a defensive coordinator as an offensive coordinator for a year in Matt Patricia after having a
Come
promising
on.
start,
Come
and
on.
your offensive line's banged up, and you couldn't draft receivers to save your life. I would have done that for free to like help you pick outside receivers because they've been able to pick is slot receivers for like since God knows when under Belichick.
Unbelievable.
So with that in mind, they didn't have anything there, and he had to
Right.
overthink so much that your game just kind of start to question stuff. So this quarterback class has a lot of guys that could go in the Brock Purdy, Mac Jones direction if that doesn't work out.
Mm.
Jonathan Brooks, best running back in the class, and he went to Carolina. I'm excited for him in 2025. Um, this year with the ACL tear he's coming off of, we'll see how that goes.
Right.
Um, and then this receiver class. I mean, this was. We'll see if it gets realized. The potential gets
Oof.
realized. But if they play to their enough of them play to their potential, this could be the best class since the Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, Odell Beckham,
Hmm.
Sammy Watkins, Devontae Adams type of talents that came out of that. I
Yeah,
think it was that 2014 class that was.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was.
that was the
It
best class
was.
I've seen overall. And this class has a chance to be as good as that arrival if they hit. And there's a lot of guys beyond like the top 5 to 7 who are interesting, like just
Yeah.
interesting
So many
guys.
interesting guys. Yeah.
Yeah, like from Malik
La-
Washington and Anais Smith, who are guys who could be like interesting slot receivers. Ricky Pearsall's a fun one.
mm-hmm.
Um, Javon
Lad
Baker.
McConkey.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is skill wise, this was a really fun class. And then Lad McConkey. I mean, he could be the top rookie receiver this year, easily.
I really believe it.
Taken, yeah,
Easily.
easily. Yeah, and I wouldn't worry about the quarterback in New York. I mean, I think Malik Neighbors is good enough to be their next Odell Beckham. I think that
Mm.
they have a chance for him to be
Mm.
that good, and then you have a guy like Brock Bowers in Las
Oh.
Vegas. If they can find a quarterback,
Oh
um,
my God.
that guy gives you like what Aaron Hernandez in his prime
Oh.
before the criminal matters, were came to
Oh,
light. Strictly football. We can
I
go
know.
strictly football. I know it's tough with him,
I know. I know.
like,
I know, Matt.
but like we go strictly football with him. He was a great prospect and a great player. And Brock Bowers has some of that versatility in some of Vernon Davis's athletic ability. Maybe
Yeah.
not
And the
quite
great
Vernon Davis, but yeah.
the crazy thing is, as a Saints fan, it's come. Oh, I'll say this: had the Raiders not taken Brock Bowers and Brock Bowers was available when the Saints got on the clock, he would have been a Saint
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than Fuwaga.
I believe it.
Um,
I
it
believe it.
hurts a little bit, but
Yeah.
I digress.
my last one. I don't know. I haven't checked out your portfolio this year yet.
Sure.
Did you have any? Did you watch Bub Means, or was he too low
No,
for you
I
to?
no, I watched Bub, and Bub's intriguing because let's see, where did I have Bub at? Here on my board. What was my grade for him? I can find him here. There's a lot of receivers I looked at. So my grade for him was pretty good. Like I go on a 100-point scale, and I try and make it intuitive that way. So it's like he's at 70. He had a 77.7 grade, which means he has the chance to be a contributor within the
Right.
next 2 to 3 years, and that means he could be, even start. Like I saw him as a guy that think about Ashton Doolin with the Colts and how he's
Oh
played
man,
right.
yeah.
He's a contributor with speed, who's got some decent size and go up and win the ball. Bub Means has a lot of that. I think he has the physicality um, that he could start if his timing routes get better. And I think that with this offense, they're not going to ask him to run a lot of like long developing timing routes.
No.
So he's probably going to be that guy who's going to run drag routes and deep
Yeah.
overs and screens. And that's something he could do really well if you put him at flanker and scheme up some plays. He could be your Gabriel Davis type of guy, with I would argue slightly better hands. Maybe
Yeah.
even much better hands. So yeah, he's intriguing, and there's some guys I've heard since I've put out my work. I've listened to after the fact who were kind of like I think Doug Farrar and Greg Cosell were both talking about
Yeah.
how they think he's a guy who could who might be better off with the Saints than he was in Pitt and Tennessee before
College.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's very intriguing, and it's in so the Saints kind of like they may quietly have a pretty decent wide receiver room. I say quietly, but they have Chris Olave, they have Rashid Shaheed, and then they've added Bub Memes, they've added A.T. Perry last season, who I still think has a lot of like when he got opportunities towards the end of last season, it was like this is this is why they drafted him. And one of our listeners was like the biggest A.T. Perry fan at Wake Forest, and I don't know if Cedric Wilson means anything because they signed him as free agency from coming from Miami. So they have good talent and weapons. Maybe I don't know if Clint Kubiak maybe sees A.T. Perry as his like Juwan Jennings in this offense kind of role, kind
Yeah.
of how he would fit that role, but that would make a lot of sense.
Bub could be the KJ Osborne, that's for sure.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
yeah.
an apt analogy. So they have weapons. It's just very interesting. One last question I had just from
Yeah.
because I feel it's so awesome is I know you put out the RSP every year, and it's free of charge. Like you're just like gifting that to the football
Oh,
community.
oh no, no, they pay. They pay.
Okay, that's
I
what I
make,
thought.
yeah, yeah, no, I make my
All right.
living off this.
That's what I thought. That's why I was like, I'm tripping.
No, no, I make a living off this. This is my full
That's
time
that's
job.
that's oh
He put a
we
lot of work in
understand
that thing, boy. That thing,
Oh,
that thing is deep.
but Matt, this it's been great. One question that one of our listeners had for you, and he asked it earlier. I don't know if you would have any insight, but he was asking if you knew anything about Nick Salaverde, who the Saints drafted last season in the draft. He was drafted. He didn't play last season. He's just going into a second year. He's essentially going to be the left guard. He was just asking if you remember him from college or how he could fit into the system.
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I could give you a great answer, but I focus mainly with RSP on quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end.
Favorite.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't give you a
I
good answer. So, yeah, well,
any
you guys
any
can
just
have
look
another guest on who can do it.
no any little like fantasy football. We do a Saints Block Party podcast, fantasy football. We do multiple leagues for all our Patreons. Any just little nugget you want to throw out for our listeners for fantasy football, whether it be dynasty, just standard.
Sure, sure. I mean, well, like I'll say, let's do this. For Dynasty, my advice is draft a lot of wide receivers. Always try when you're building a team, start with wide receiver and a franchise quarterback, not a rookie. Get an established franchise starter, and then go build with receivers and stockpile because eventually you can trade for what you want. Don't go running back anymore. Like just if you even if you need, and I've won leagues where I've just kept drafting quarterbacks because I was in that position where I was like, I'm not going to get anything else. So yeah, I have Russell Wilson in his prime. I have Jared Goff. I have Lamar Jackson now. I have Patrick Mahomes now. I'm going to pick Anthony Richardson now because eventually I can those that turned into Jonathan Taylor and Miles Garrett and Nick Chubb because eventually people need a starting quarterback to get over the hump, and I got them all. So if you wide receiver is the most liquid position in the draft, so I would say that to trade and to be able to draft. So if it when in doubt, just keep picking that one position and get really good at it, and then you'll be able to shape your team. And then in just
Interesting.
redraft, I'll just say this as terms of a player, I I've always liked Saquon Barkley. I've never loved Saquon Barkley. I mean, he's a wonderful talent, but I think this is the Saquon Barkley vengeance is mine tour this year. Because if you think DeAndre Swift if people were excited about DeAndre Swift on that team last year, and DeAndre Swift got some great opportunities because 2 and 3 defenders were occupying Jalen Hurts, and
Hurts. Yep.
even Swift, who's not great at running between the tackles, was looking good.
He was.
Saquon Barkley, yeah. I mean, this guy. I would say this is the year I'm making a priority to get me some Saquon Barkley for the first time ever.
Interesting.
One last question from the chat. Ask Matt what team is he rebuilding in college football 25 that comes out in July.
Is which team am I rebuilding?
Yeah, in college football 25, the college football
Oh,
NCAA college football.
oh, which team am I rebuilding? Well, I graduated from the University of Georgia. I covered their football
Okay.
team during the Hines Ward, Terrell Davis, Eric Zier era. But the first school that I went to was the University of Miami in the late 1980s with Jimmy Johnson.
Oh
Yep.
man.
And I've always been a U fan. So I would be rebuilding the Miami
Uh oh.
Hurricanes without a
Getting back to
doubt.
prominence. Okay. All right.
That's who
We
I
see
would
you.
be rebuilding. Yep.
Okay.
Love it.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Matt. If you don't know of Matt's work, please check out Matt Waldman, RSP, which is the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. His website, you can go to it. It's mattwaldmanrsp.com. You can follow Matt on Twitter/X at Matt Waldman on Twitter. It's been a pleasure. We loved having you on. We definitely have to make this more of a more occurrence, just like a one off. But thank you so much for coming on, just chatting in with us. It's been a great conversation. We really appreciate it, man.
Oh man, it was natural. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to doing it again. You guys just let me know.
Hell yeah. Appreciate it, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. And with
Thank you.
that, we're out.
Peace.